I'll do it anyway. And yeah, it was a bit of a joke back in the late 90s, early 2000s with us around the fact that with the projects we were running, there were so many other elements that were variable to a success around stakeholder management, change management, and the like. But if you have a Olympic Games coming up, or if you've got a theatre to open, or you're getting constrained around a budget change relating to renewable investments and renewable energy zones, these are the variables that you'll need to live with when running projects that you really need to manage, and people will be asking you as a manager to be able to flex those variables. I always chucked in quality into the mix of this conversation, with the idea being that it's a fixed constraint, something that you've defined via the business case and specification, that leads to the benefits and the whether that be a social or economic or environmental benefit that the investment's supposed to return. So we always need to keep that in mind. If we're building a bridge, it has to stay up for at least a bit longer than a few weeks and things like that. So there's some limitations in our budgetary flexibility and scope flexibility when we start looking at those quality-based constraints. So obviously this triangle is saying they all interrelate. And I think one of the challenges that project managers have had over the years is that these are managed in different systems, disparate systems. They're quite challenging to integrate. The impact of one should impact the other, but often they get out of sync. You'll have a lovely P6 RMS project schedule that's got construction finishing 3 months before the construction spend finishes in the cash flow profile, those sorts of things. And so what we're going to show in this particular presentation is how we synchronize those in a bit of a harmonious dance, and hopefully therefore eliminating that risk of having quite large disparities between what your cost plan is saying, for example, and what your schedule Gantt chart is saying. Now, to put that into a UniPhi context, what we're saying is you sort of need to understand the UniPhi architecture. There is a hierarchy, but there's also a matrix to the UniPhi data model. So what we have, UniPhi is a portfolio first system. So we have portfolios at the top. They're made up of a collection of projects or activities. And so what we're going to do as well in this is we're going to take it, how you configure UniPhi for different perspectives. Some of them overlap and are either or scenarios, but we're just going to look at different perspectives of that. And so that's why we've got things like project/activities. It depends on your type of deployment. And then sitting underneath that project/activity, you have a contract work breakdown structure or standard tasks. And also on the cost side, which isn't in this graph, which I'll update for the next webinar, there's a cost breakdown structure as well. And so those things need to be linked in some way, shape, or form. And then once you start capturing information against them, we call them facts against the dimensions. And those facts that we'll be capturing in this demonstration are straight out costs or expenses, effort against the activities, rates that apply to those people who are performing that effort, and through that, the ability to roll those up into those dimensions that we've got above in that particular slide. When we're talking about all of these things, we're talking about a actual plus forecast data series, and we're talking about a baseline to compare that to, whether that is on schedule or whether that's on cost or whether that's on scope. So those elements all come in, so variations and additional activities, changing scope, that obviously then has a cost impact and will have a schedule impact as well. And we can compare that to our original baseline. And so all of these elements will have those two data series and a variance from one to the other. All right, so that's the little bit of the background. Now, in terms of how we're going to approach the session, I've got a little bit of an agenda here. We're going to do it based on some use cases. The first one is asset owners. And so obviously they're paying all the bills on a particular construction project. Now, if you're looking at internal projects and you're on the call and it's, that's you as well, essentially. The person who's paying the bills for the job. But then you'll have breakups of that down the value chain, and they'll all have slightly different requirements in what they need to get out of the system to manage their piece of the puzzle. So the second one, we'll look at how very large scale major project design teams are using that to track those elements of time, cost, and scope. It's a little bit different. And then they also use the one that's used by consultants who run their enterprise resource planning system through UniPhi. So it's an either or for the engineers on their major projects. So if you are in those two spaces, definitely hang around. If you're an asset owner, there's probably stuff to get out of the other two, but I don't know if my voice after 20 minutes, feel free to drop off. Okay, so, and then the last one, that coup de grace I mentioned before, is integrating quality into the picture. So let's start off with the asset owner. I'll get out of this terrible PowerPoint stuff, and we'll get into UniPhi. And so we're just logged into a portfolio UniPhi deployment. We have a suite of projects coming down. We're an asset owner. These are all different assets we're investing in. And we're going to look at how we maintain this information so that we can then get consolidated portfolio information out the other end. And we're going to look at that portfolio information as we go through as well. Yeah, I've got quite a few participants, so I'm trying not to be distracted by admitting them in. All right, so let's start off. And where I'm going to start, actually, I'm going to bring up my notes all over the shop. I'm going to start with the time module. And so the idea here is that we're going to use the high level schedule that we have in UniPhi to drive the phasing of costs. So the time and the costs will integrate, and the phasing of those costs over time will happen in an automated way. That's the goal that we're trying to do out of this first workflow. I've just clicked to the time module. I'm in all projects, and this is the first sort of portfolio sort of level view that a property group general manager of property kind of really loves UniPhi for. As you scroll down, you're getting the portfolio of projects across a stage-gated approach, which if they've rolled it out well, they'll be tracking that stage-gated approach through documentation that people are signing off digitally. And you can see as I scroll through, you can see where projects are at. Here's the current timeline. There's always a baseline, as I mentioned before. So we've got the blue baseline, the green actual forecast. And you can see in this particular construction one project, which we're going to be working through in this webinar, we've slipped a little bit. The other thing you can see integrated within this is the contract. So it actually can go down to quite a low level. And when I drill into this construction one project, it'll go even a level further down into it. So if you had 100 purchases and POs on this project, they'd all be listed here if you wanted to. And again, you can roll that up or scroll that down to whatever level you like. So for example, to labor the point a little, if I select life cycle here, one of the ones that a lot of these group PMs, group general managers will like is, and apologies for the long life cycle list here, but that's just a demonstration conundrum. When are my projects going to finish? And so by selecting the construction phase, this is now portfolio view of just that phase, and you can see where things are going to drop. And people across the organization will be constantly asking you, when's my new library for a university, or my new computer hall, or my new hospital, or my new school cola, whatever it might be. And so this gives people a really easy way of portfolio viewing that information and communicating that quite quickly and randomly. So that's one of the reporting platforms within UniPhi. Been around for a while, obviously, but just worth remembering that that's where this is sort of going. Now, if I go back to all and I look at my project that I'm going to drill into, which is this construction one project, which has slipped a little, I'm going to click on that, and that'll actually take me into the schedule. And so you can see that it's quite easy to maintain just that component because it's not many data points, right? Got a new column here in this particular instance, the link dates as they've been updated. And this is what's going to drive our cost and cash flow in a moment. But before I get into that, there's a couple of things worth noting. Even though this is quite high level, it can actually bubble up from a WBS, which you'll see when I get to the infrastructure ones of thousands of tasks with some major projects with thousands of tasks. But even in an enterprise one, you'll see how it can do that. And equally, if you've got external schedules coming at you left, right, and center, you can synchronize these to bubble up here through the external schedule. So when I click on the external schedule, if I upload a file into the system, I can either upload from P6 or Microsoft Project. It'll bring in whatever those files are. It'll be an XML file, so you'd have to export it from the interface in MS Project or P6 into XML. And when you do that, you get the WBS of that particular schedule here. That's on this side, this first column. You'll see that there's little squares coming in there. If I filter for milestone, that enables me to capture these as milestones in the UniPhi project. I just click add to milestones and they'll go in there. I'm not going to do that because I've got something I want to use that milestones for. And then what will happen is if you get an updated program from the contractor or from a scheduler during design, you just re-upload that file and it'll automatically update all the dates, which, as you'll see later, will also automatically upload, or sorry, not upload, but update all of your cash flow phasing and cost reporting just from that one link. Other filters here, you can see critical tasks and just normal tasks. And with regards to normal tasks, you can map those to a lifecycle phase, which again will synchronize those higher level dates. So for example, in this particular implementation, we've got a configuration and integration kind of series that would all probably map to a construction or an implementation phase that sits within here. And so the min-max of those would roll into that schedule and bubble up into the overarching dashboard that we saw in the first screen. So that's a concept, one concept. There's going to be two others where you can get low-level WBS detail, and then that synchronizes into the higher level schedule, which, when you'll see in a moment, will also synchronize into the cost plan. Right, so then the other one to show here is I've just got the one milestone in here. I'm going to use that as our coup de grace milestone in the end when we've got some issues coming into the project. And you can see that's been flagged to come in at the end of the construction phase before defects liability, which is a little bit lower. And we're going to see what happens with that. Now, and you can see how that's being impacted because I've linked it to the construction phase there. And with those uploads as well, you can get that to synchronize the progress as well. So your progress can come from your schedule outside of UniPhi as well, which will then drive your own value statistics that you'll see later. All right, so here's our project, construction one. That's our scheduling. We're now going to jump to the cost module. And again, if I just jump back up to all projects again, another sort of value add to the property general manager's sort of goal is to be able to get a view of their performance, green being actual, red being forecast, and blue being baseline, and also a whole of project variance across their portfolio, which in UniPhi 22, these are all changed to change the pivoting, and you can add your own charts and columns into these tables below. So if I go, the favorite one in the old days was contract by project, which just gives us our entire portfolio of projects down here. Hello. And then, yeah, if you've got any questions, probably the chat's the best way to go, and I'll review them in a minute.
Okay, fine.
I am showing my screen. I'm presuming everyone's able to see. Yes, good. Thanks for that. All right. And yeah, so that's another sort of portfolio embedded dashboard that people can quickly see which projects are performing well, like this one's spectacular, and which ones are performing poorly. So now I'm going back to my demo project. And it's the same view, but I can then pivot that back to code. So now I've got whatever elemental cost breakdown structure. So that's the other dimension I was talking about in the slide, set up to capture budget information and to have it approved, and then to capture commitments and forecast against that, and to track the performance of the project across all of these types of codes as control accounts, including contingency drawdown. And you can see already on this project, it's like baking a cake. This is one I prepared earlier. We've got no actuals yet. This is a new project that we're estimating, but actuals will come in green, forecasts will continue on in red, and the blue is the original baseline that was approved when we approved this $42 million budget. You can see we're already over. We'll explain that in a moment when we let the contractors contract. It was higher than we thought, so we're going to need to get approval for that to increase the budget, which we could do through the new budget transfer system or the old budget change, but that's kind of outside the scope of this webinar. As you can see, lots of functionality, but the cool part is the integration of time and costs we're showing here. And so to demonstrate that, what I'm going to do is jump across to the phasing screen. And so this is a new screen. This is completely rewritten. We used to have two phasing screens. They've been merged into one. We used to call one manual and one auto. And the reason we've done that is to try and make it more live and more logical what is happening in the phasing of your data. So just looking at this particular value screen here, which is the total screens, this is your total forecast here that you've got at the moment. This is the budget that you've got approved, and this is what therefore what you're going to phase, and you want to make sure that this phase total equals that. Because I'm in the actual forecast view, I could pivot to the budget and I'd be phasing that 42 million. And so these are the critical things that you want to have managed in this. Now, the way we're doing it in this particular exercise is we're linking the different codes. And so this is mentioned for an asset owner. I would strongly recommend that you're doing this cash flow at the code level. You can also do it at contract, but that can make you want to pull your hair out. So one of the other changes we did within this, you can actually see the contracts that you've let within this screen, but we're defaulting to chart of accounts. It used to default to all. So that just makes it nice and clean. And where you've got blanks, like you can see here, you can just hide those by clicking show blanks or hide blanks here. So just to shrink that screen and make it a little bit more digestible, but we're actually seeing everything here on one page anyway. We do have some clients with some long cost breakdown structures, so that's the reason why we've implemented that. Now, in this screen, all of the columns here are customizable, as are the views. So you can see I've got developer view and I've got a simple view. If I go to simple, it'll change the perspective, remove some options, and it's showing me a much simpler screen. I can then click back to developer and I get more columns. The way that gets set up is within these icons here. So if I click the little jail symbol there, that's columns. And that's what my brain reads when I see that. And that's how I would add extra columns into the view. And so I've got enough for what I need in this purpose, but you're going to see some other columns come in when I do the contracts module, which are available in the cost module as well. So what you see in contract, you will see in cost more or less. But the other things I wanted to introduce here is the ability to use what we call a benchmarking phasing algorithm and the linking to the life cycle phases that we had in the first part of this session where I had the time module. So by selecting these, so construction obviously happens into construction phase, and selecting all the consultants for whole of project and contingency, you could draw that down in construction. At the moment, it's saying whole of project. You've changed that, and the dates here update. You'll see that I updated automatically. So, you know, it's no longer 2026 start, it's 2028. And that was a dynamic update. It hasn't saved into the database yet, but for the end user, they can see that change automatically. And then the other thing we've done here is we've done benchmark, except for this one here where we've got our own coding, which I'll talk about later. It's specific to this project, sitting underneath the standard. So the standard is there. This is project specific, and we're just using monthly phasing for that. Now, this benchmarking, I'm just going to save that first, could change the contingency profile here. It'll be still 0, but you would have seen all the dollars pushed out from no longer starting in August 2026 to be starting now out into 2028. So that's pushed everything out for those two codes. Now, what is this benchmarking thing? Well, what it does is if you click this funky symbol here, someone on the call's got to come up with a decent name for it for me, so I don't call it funky next time. What it's done is it's actually looked at completed projects in your profile. So if you have used UniPhi for a while, and I know some clients who have really rich databases here of past projects, these are projects that are finished. This is how much they spent on them, and this is what they were called and when they started and finished. If you've got a big collection, can filter that down by these metadatas, including custom fields. So if you've captured building areas and building functional units and you select those, what it'll do is it'll expand this option to say, okay, here's the metadata information and the fact information about these projects that might help you to decide which ones you want to use for profiling. And then you can, if you've got a lot, you can then even filter that out by saying, just show me between 20,000 and 50,000 square meters of fully enclosed covered area. So that gives you a list. And then when I hit save, what it's going to do is use these profiles and how the money was spent to phase this new profile. And that's what it's done here. And we did that on the actual forecast and on the budget. And so that's how we got the baseline line there. And so if I go to dashboards, that's how come, I'm going to turn the charts back on, we're seeing some differences here between the red forecast and the blue budget. Now, that will mean that will now self-maintain. And so if I was to go into the contracts module now, which is a lower level down to the costs, so costs are set up here with codes and then contracts map into those. So I'm going to go to the contracts module here. And you can see that if I change this to contract value, and again, you can do the same in here with creating your own views and things like that. I've got a main contract here for 35 million. That was the main reason that we went over budget. It was only 29 million in the budget for that. And you can see we're 5 million over because we've coded it to that construction code, the lump sum code there, and that only had 29. Now, we also know that, contracts have variations. And so over time, you'll start having those. And as you log them, and not sure why that's taking so long, but it's because it's a webinar, put a value to it. As you can forecast it, or I'm going to make it a pending forecast and put it to our lump sum again. I'll just make it a big number so it sticks out. And then once that's done, we're going to go to the schedule screen. Actually, no, I'm not. That's actually done. That's why it's taken. Okay, sorry. First stumble. I'm going to go back to the cost module now, because we're not phasing at the contract module. That's a bit of a no-no. And you'll see the red has gone up even further now, because as soon as I hit that variation against the contract, you'll see that there's a $2.5 million variation there. So this has gone up to 37. We're now $8 million higher, and that is automatically phased that against the lump sum. So you can see there's still no, I'm in budget. Let me go back to actual forecast. There's still no variance in phasing. So that has instantly gone up to $37.5 million. And so just by adding that variation and not doing anything else, it automatically adjusted your phasing. And so that's a scope change. It's an impact on scope, latent conditions you didn't know that you've got to work on, that now has had a valuation to go to it and has automatically been phased out over time at that increased cost. So hopefully that demonstrates the concept we're trying to do. I just implicated the iron triangle in that one demonstration. And people doing that on their projects and monitoring the impact will get those cash flow comparisons and the visuals of those cash flow comparisons, as well as schedule comparisons, because the schedule potentially could change out, which again, this is a two-way street. If because of that variation, have to push out the time here and I change this date, that will obviously update the phasing, but it'll also update the date in the time module. And so it's a two-way updating. If I update dates in the time module, it pushes through into the cash flow. If I update dates in the cash flow, it updates into the time module if I've linked them in this particular scenario. And so again, the time and the cost and the scope is being synchronized in that manner. Now, one other thing I just wanted to show you around that. Before I go, the other thing on this is, as you start to progress claims in the contracts module and do the day-to-day activity, and that might be done by an external PM, the consultant coming into your deployment and doing that for you as an asset owner, that's bringing in the actuals into this project. And then what will happen if you're an asset owner is, not so much if you're a consultant, but probably worth to know, in the configuration under financial years, sorry, just muting some people. If I go into the financial years here, and I go into the current financial year, which is ending today, Happy New Year. Another one bites the dust. So you can see I've closed up to May, a couple of days after the end of the month. Normally the accountant would come in and they would close these timelines. And then when that happens, it rephases everything based on the actuals for that month, and the difference between that and what was expected gets rephased over the remainder of that timeline. It's not pushed into the next month. If it's an automatic phasing, it's pushed across the rest of the timeline. So if there's another 18 months to go, that say 100,000 you didn't spend this month will be portioned over the remaining 18 months. But again, instantly your cash flow is updated for that lack of spend, and you're able to see the differences between the red and the blue lines, the green and the blue lines as well, within the visuals and then within other dashboards as well, and other reports that you can run from the system. So this is a pretty crucial step for asset owners to do, to maintain that cash flow and have that roll from one period to the next. And then the other thing I wanted to just harp on before we move on to the next area of the system for consultants is just how you could possibly get that benchmark data into the system if you're new to UniPhi, or if you've got your own algorithms that you want to bring into the system. This enables you to do it. And so firstly, how that works is it has to be completed projects. So when you're in the summary screen of UniPhi, you can click the portfolio filter and select completed. And so nothing ever gets archived. It's always stored. It's just, we default view is open phases, so live jobs. And so when you select complete, you get all that rich historical projects there that you're going to leverage in this benchmark instance. And then what you can do is you create the project first, put it into complete state. And then if I was to say to select, I don't know, this grand one, I think that one's already got one. Let me just pick another one. I don't know why I'm messing around with this. That one will do. And you go to the cost module and you go to the phasing and you select the correct chart, which in our instance is post-contract, and you click this little import screen. If you've got that data phased in a spreadsheet, you can just bring it in. And so, and again, you can do it as a portfolio import too. That just means that you need another column here called project ID. And you can have all of them in one spreadsheet if you've got it, and then you can import them all in. But I've only got one project here. So I'm just going to highlight the range and then import that into here as an actual. Okay, so the importance there is as an actual, and then it's not doing that one because they're not standard. That's what we call project specific code. And when you save that in, that'll bring those in as an actual profile in a completed project, and then the Marion Tower extension will become one of those projects available to select when you're benchmarking. And so if you were doing this, and sometimes we just do this on a one-liner. So if I, for example, just cancel out of this for a second, we have a chart here called cash flow. And so for early stage investments where you don't have a detailed breakdown into post-contract, you can just get a thumbsuck or a parametric model estimate of what the budget's going to be and import the cash flow. So set a budget, do it on budget. You just say, $45 million. In the phasing screen, I'm going to phase the budget because there's a value there for that. And you're selecting benchmark and you're selecting the projects. So different set of projects this time because it's selected leisure. So it's looked up leisure and picked projects that are in that. If I wanted to get others in there, I could just import a one-liner profile. There could even just be 0.02%, 5%, 7% each month that you think the earned profile is, and import that. And then what you do is you just label the project as what that cash flow profile is. It might be medium tower or villas or 10-story units. You label it how you know that profile kind of works as an earned value profile for your future projects. And that way, when you're coming in here, it'll come up as that description, and you're able to say, okay, I'm doing a 100 unit 10-story residential tower. That's what that one's labeled. You tick it, and it phases your cash flow out based on your algorithm for the $45 million. So that's the way you can both get historical data in there to train the benchmark. A bit of machine learning type thing happens underneath the hood, and then otherwise use your own single project profiles to have more algorithms that this benchmark's going to use to phase out different types of projects within your business. Okay, so where we're going now is the same project, construction one, but we're now looking at it from a value chain element down the line. So we have lots of different clients here in UniPhi using the system for different purposes. In this instance, I'm running my consulting business in UniPhi. I've got all of my contracts with my clients in the system. Similar type structure though. Sorry, let's go back in again. I'm still going to leverage off this phasing methodology. I'm also going to show you how you don't have to leverage off this in this particular demonstration. So all of that stuff that I showed at the beginning is still applicable, but this time I'm going to go to the contracts module. I have been working in the cost. And in UniPhi, there's 3 types of contracts. Revenue, internal cost, and project cost. The project cost is when you're managing someone else's money so that the system knows that's not part of your profitability. So you can do both in the system. You can manage your own fee and your own cost, and then also manage someone else's, like the asset owner we were just talking about before. So if I filter for revenue, the main works contract that we were managing before no longer displays. And if I click on this PM consultancy here, you'll see that in the contracts module, you can create your own WBS, and it's actually N levels. So we have some people that get 6, 8, 7, 6, 7, 8. Well, everyone's going to laugh at 6, 7 now. 6, 7 levels deep. This is very flat. It's just one. And then sitting underneath it is, but this is pretty common for consultants, classifications as well as an example of people. that we're going to use in the contract value to build up the estimate. But we're actually going to do it in the schedule, because in that way we can integrate both time and cost, or in this instance revenue, but someone's revenue is another person's cost. Is that a wise person once upon a time? And so within that environment, we've got this WBS, which is scope. This is our scope of work with the client. How much are we going to charge the client, and how's that going to go over time? So first your tasks, then your classifications, then in the schedule screen, again, lots of columns. We've got even some new ones now. And again, the ability to create your own views and have those pivot. In the contract schedule screen, there's actually two views that you can pivot against as well. There's effort view and cash flow view. I'm in the effort view, which means I'm looking at the amount of hours we're estimating we're going to need to do this scope of work. And to do that, in the new version of UniPhi 22, we've given you another volume metric. In the old system, it was just quantity times rate. You can now build up the quantity by saying, okay, I'll do actually Dennis and Joe here. You can see they're people rather than classifications. People have a thing called standard hours per day. And so if someone's part-time, they could be 3.5 or 3.6 and 7.5. I've got 8 here because it's old school. And so we can then say, okay, we know that they're going to be 50% allocated and 25% allocated. And the system will use that standard hours to calculate how many hours per week, and then phase that out over the duration, which is coming from the feasibility schedule that we had in the time module. So that task has been selected with the feasibility schedule. And so those dates are automatically there. We're using a weekly phasing method, and I've just upped the amount of hours because they had none before, so you can see there's no phasing there. All of that is updated dynamically, but I do need to hit save for that to post to the database. And now we've got a new estimate for the feasibility phase, because all of these classifications and people have rates. And so if I look at these hours here going out into the future, I can pivot those to be what's their percent allocation, what's their cost, and what's their revenue. So if I select revenue, it's applied the rates. So now we've got a contract revenue and a total revenue, which will be different because it doesn't have these amounts. I'm going to show you how to get that into the contract, because this is an estimating tool first, and then you can contract it with a client later, second step. That's that profile there. I can see the cost value of that, and obviously in dashboards later on, I'll get the differences between those two. And I can see the percent allocation. So, and with the percent allocation, if I turned off phasing auto, I could actually phase at that level. Go back to hours, and I've got numbers in there. Now, if I wanted Denise and Joe to get that 440 and 220 hours into the contract for feasibility, and everything else to match up as well, I can either do a subset or tick. When you tick this, you get lots of different options. Copy budget and rebaseline is bringing the phased information in line. So there's always two lines, right? An actual, you can see there's a forecast line here. I can have a budget line as well, and an actual line coming from timesheets that'll be actual plus forecast. So I can copy the budget to that line, or I can copy the actual forecast to the budget if I'm rebaselining. And I can snapshot that as well. I'll show you in a moment. But I'm just going to copy to value. And copy to value means put the quantity that you've just calculated as a total quantity into the value screen. So doing that means that if I go to the value screen now, Joe and Denise now have 440 and 220 hours at their rate, which means I've got a contracted total of 57 and 28 for those two, which I can then invoice against once we start doing the work. And so the schedule is like a lower level build-up of that information that when you're happy with it, you can then move into the contract and then present that information in a proposal via a document and a contract, and then a services agreement, which is your scope of work, which is the scope management element, and hopefully get it signed off and hopefully do it effectively and make some money. So again, these are two-way date synchronizations. If I push these out, it'll go back to the time module and update them. But equally, if I go to the time module and kick things out, it'll flow through here as well. And again, when you timesheet in the month and close the month end, like I did, like I showed you with the property developer choosing month end for the cost cash flow, it'll rephase the effort based on how many actual hours came in from the timesheet system. So you'll see at the moment there's no actuals booked to this project, The remaining gets reduced by the actual hours, and the phasing dates get moved to the next month, and it gets rephased from whatever you've got left out into the future, which you can always compare. And so if I was to go into this thing and say all, the graph now here has been updated, which is new. You don't have these charts in UniPhi 21 to be able to compare those two lines. And you can tell, obviously, it's because of the extra time I put in for Joe and Denise, or Dennis. That's caused the red to go much higher. But equally, if I've got a snapshot version of that baseline I want to compare to, I can select that here. So these are all month-end snapshots. So when you close a month-end, it can take a snapshot of all of that data, or you can do your own snapshot when you're happy with a budget by clicking the little camera. When you do that, you can either snapshot the actual forecast to become a budget version, and even the approved version, or you can snapshot the budget, either or. And then that one becomes selectable to compare within this chart and within the interface itself, but also within the Power BI dashboards that you can build. And if you attend next week's webinar, if this one hasn't been too dull for you, I'll show you how you can create your own dashboards utilizing this data and our REST API and a little bit of Claude coding, or vibe coding as they call it these days, the young kids, which basically creates a limitless reporting platform based on the structure of the information you're getting into your management system, being this UniPhi platform, and people doing their daily timesheets and reforecasting that data as it comes along. There's a whole bunch of other nitty-gritty features about easy adding people into these things and stuff like that. But the main focus of this webinar was the integration of time, cost, and scope. And hopefully we've done that. The only other one that I'll quickly show you around that is if you're doing a large major project, you might have, instead of a portfolio of projects, you might have one deployment, which is the project. And that we do in this, not that one, thing called infrastructure. Just before I jump into that, though, the reason I had this here is when you get all of that data that I've just shown you, you can then start to do these types of P&L reporting across your portfolio. Without the effort forecast, you can't get a cost to complete. And so it's quite easy to get actual costs and have an actual profit because people are timesheeting and you're raising invoices, and lots of people do that. But if you're not forecasting out your effort, you're not going to get a cost to complete. Therefore, you're not going to get a profit of completion and get a gross margin review of your portfolio there. And if you are doing that effort estimate, you're also then going to get resource planning data that gives you an idea of your forward pipeline, who's working too hard, who needs to be reallocated out. So this is a graphical visual of that, pretty dodgy data there. But if I pivot this to hours, I get people. And if I expand it, I get their projects. And if I pivot it to percent, I can now see that Annie Lennox is over allocated on this timeline. And I scroll through and that's all there. What I'll do on the question around delegation of authority, I'll incorporate that into the summary webinar on August 3rd, just because this one's a little bit tight for time. But yes, when we're looking at these interfaces, you will see that there's a little document icon there. And when you generate that, you have the ability to then create different agreements in the budget system. It could be a project management plan or something like that, more internal. But in the contracts system, it tends to be a variation or a consulting contract that you can generate, or a proposal. And so and then that can be reviewed and signed off through delegations of authority. So that's the sort of workflow for that. A little bit quick, high level, but yeah, I'll go into that in some more detail. I'll note that down for the summary one. All right, so yeah, when I've got this, I can then expand on Annie and see where that is. And if I click on these links, it takes me into the resource planning view to then be able to do things like, if I select her name, I can reallocate her to someone else. And then if I say, okay, Arthur's going to pick up her work, she's no longer got that 80% allocation during that period, and she'll be appearing when that dashboard refreshes as a no longer over allocated. So that's the sort of reporting benefits, some of the reporting benefits you can start to get out of that workflow I just showed you around effort estimating and phasing it out. Now, the last one is this infrastructure one, and you'll see that the projects are no longer labeled projects. Yeah, so Sama, that was one of the things I was just saying. So when you close, you have to close the financial period And then the timesheet hours that were booked in that period will reduce the remaining hours, and then the remaining hours will rephase over the remaining period of that project. So it's not a weekly thing, but it's a monthly thing when you're closing off a month end. Is how you get the weekly to rephase into the future. All right, so back into the infrastructure screen, you'll see when we do this as a project, so it could be Western Harbour Tunnel, for example, these are all activities that people are going to do, parent-child. So you've got a work package and you've got activities that sit underneath those. Now, if you're also doing an infrastructure project with a lot of program of works, we just call that contracts as tasks. So we have this thing here called contract-based WBS versus projects as tasks. We're looking at the project as task one. The contract-based one is exactly the same as what I just showed you for the consulting, where it had the phases of its work, except you would design that WBS to be whatever you need it to be for your particular major project. But under the projects as tasks one, we get the projects listed here. Now that's just a label to help demos. You wouldn't really have that label. So here they are here. And then there's a subtly different interface for these then. So when we go to the time module, it's the same interface, but there's some benefits to the portfolio view of external schedule. What you can do is you can map this is mapping your milestones, which are then going to become progress milestones against these activities. So when you get progress coming from P6, it'll have a % complete here. It'll automatically update these in the milestones against these activities, and therefore automatically incrementing your earned value. And then the other thing you can do is link these to these activities which are coming from P6 into the lifecycle phase as well, which will automatically update that Gantt chart that I was showing you before, which when you're looking at it from a whole of project perspective is going to be all tasks as they're scheduled out, which I think this one's in the past. Nope, there's just not a lot of scheduling going on in that particular in this particular database, but all of your activities would be shown here just as they would within the P6 schedule, because all of them are displayed if they had the data. So coming back into this one, when you're in the schedule, you'll see a couple of different designs. You can still have the life cycle, or sometimes they just have a in progress life cycle phase, which is start and end date, which maps from the activity in P6, or you're managing that all in UniPhi, and it doesn't matter. When you're managing all in UniPhi, often they'll use this little benefit here where you can create a template of milestones that have a standard listing of stage gates that they're going to go through. Let's say this was a bunch of drawings you had to release, and they would get an incremental earned value profile and progress, which you would then update on occasions over the period of time. And you can see that this particular issued for review went through a 15, 50, 75, and 100% progress across 2020, a little while ago, and so on and so forth across these data points. This one here is you wouldn't have both, not mutually exclusive, so you just have the one-liner that's picking up the earned value from a % complete. Either you're typing it in or it's coming from a schedule. And with these ones, if they are a deliverable MIDP, this is called Master Deliverable Plan, Implementation Plan, I think you asked for, we can inherit that from the deliverables in some either our own doc control documents module or some third-party document system. So again, what looks like a little bit of data overhead can be integrated into the workflow for these to be updated. Now, when that happens and you start shifting things around, you also need to baseline your resource plan profile and your expenses. The resource plan profile on a project-based activity happens in the resources module, not in the contracts module. And you'll see very similar interface, but it's just people against that particular activity, or classification, which you can actually focus on one or the other by filtering here. Same type of things, you can link it to life cycles or just schedule it yourself. You've got the automatic phasing, people are timesheeting to it, actuals are coming in, it's rephasing when you close the month end, and that's giving you an actual forecast to complete. And then you can compare that to an earned value forecast to complete. And you should also have the baseline, which we haven't set for this project, but that's the current version. There was an original version, which you can see the budget hours there. It's just, it was a long time ago. So in this window, you're not seeing it. We're also missing the phased hours there. So if I need to add that in, I click the little prism thing again, and that's columns, and I can add the phase total in there to see that my budget view has some phase total somewhere along the timeline. if I turn on my chart, I'll be able to see where those are. So they're back in 2021. So this demo's been going around for a while, but this demo was before we had all of these columns, extra columns and features. It was all just manual phasing with what used to be a pop-up box called bulk add for the automatic features. These are now all embedded into the one screen with a lot of client-side, what we call client-side things. So as soon as I type something in here, in theory, it should be updating. Once I've got a duration, it'll update the total, which it did over here. And if I set a start date, it'll use the duration to automatically calculate the end date. And so lots of little bits of usability improvements there to help people get the data into the product and starting to track those benefits. Do all of that. And it's a different way of slicing the information again. In this instance, what we're doing on major projects is driving earned value. And so people can see through SPI and CPI how they're performing and drill that down into the work package level. You can see all three not too great, but also then drill into the activity level. Actually, this one's not too bad, but these two aren't great. And start to troubleshoot, discuss, panic, pull hair out. Just checking my notes here, guys. Okay, so they're the three scenarios that I talked about in the beginning. The coup de grace is the quality control. And for that, we're selling the issues module. And specifically, two elements to that: the integration with Outlook and just the day-to-day capture of things that are happening, early warnings on EC contracts, whatever's during design causing iterations and design paralysis, logging those issues and having conversations about them and starting to resolve them. So just going into my email and bringing across an email, how does that affect everything that I just did? I mean, aside from this is good quality control, because we're looking at it from something's happened, it's going to change scope, change budget, change time. We can make that drive that change. So in this instance, this is actually at the moment logging into my system. Let me just log into the one we've just been demonstrating with. Sorry about that. And I'm going to create a new issue in that project that we were just working on and categorize it. So that. And that's all I'm going to do for now. I'm just going to hit save. So that's brought the issue in and we can start working on resolving that. I'm still in email. I can ignore that, move on to the next one, or I can jump in and start managing this issue. I could tick off a workflow to manage that, but what I am going to do is link that to the building being commissioned milestone, which exists in the time module. Now, if we just open that module up for a moment. I've lost it behind the Zoom thing. Okay, so at the moment, that construction phase is finishing on the actual forecast line in 2nd of May 2028, and we have both our revenue contract and our cost module codes being driven with cash flow phasing off that number. If I come back into the issue and I link it to that, and then I put the date, which memory like a sieve, I've forgotten already. Let's put it out to, so 31st of December 2029. Let's do it in 2030. So January 2030. Right, so that saves automatically just to spice things up in UniPhi. That posts back and saves. And that has cascaded through. So if I just refresh this page, that is now needing to be scrolled to get there. So I just need to change the date doesn't actually go out far enough because it's moved. And so you'll see now that that is now the 31st of January. I can see it as a date in here on the construction side, 31st of January. And if I then go into my cost module, go to the phasing, you'll see that the actual on the construction line, actual forecast view, give me a heart attack there for a minute, is now the 31st of January. And if I go into the revenue contract, it'll be the same thing. And so that has rephased the construction contract out to that extended month, added another month in, all from the change of one quality-based issue that's going to change the date. So that was my finale of how quality control can come into this and how you can link that to the way it impacts on the schedule and the way it impacts on the phasing of the costs. And if you then log the variation, you saw how the variation then drove the cost back up. When you do log a variation, you can link that to that issue. So again, that quality control has driven that. So if I come in here, we had the, that's my consulting one because I had the revenue one. Yeah, go back into my main contract. We had a variation I logged in this webinar here. And again, if I click on the comments here, I can link that to that issue I just raised. And that way I've got a record of what drove that $2.5 million, which also then drove the date change and everything else. All right, that's the main crux of this particular webinar. But just before you all head off, I just wanted to reiterate a few things. So next webinar is next Tuesday, same bat time, bat channel, unless you want to see a replay of this at 6 o'clock tonight when we do the UK, or if depending on if you're on the east coast of Australia, that is. Or you can catch it again tomorrow at 8 a.m. Otherwise, I should get better with each one, hopefully. Otherwise, we've got a brand new webinar on next week, on Tuesday next week, same time, noon, Australian Eastern Standard Time. It'll be looking at generating a application off the UniPhi platform. And then 2 weeks after that, we have another one. And then 2 weeks after that is the 3rd of August, which is when we launch the application to our client base. During that time, we will update and go live with our knowledge base, which I can really strongly recommend you use even now. A lot of people don't know it exists. There's a really cool chatbot that's named after my son. It's called Dante AI. It's not really named after my son, but his name is Dante. So ask it a question, it gives you some really good answers. Otherwise, you can just browse the knowledge base. There are manuals that you can download a PDF there as well. People ask us for those, they can, access through there. So definitely have a go at that. And what will happen is, you can see UniPhi 21 is here, that's 12 months ago. We will have a UniPhi 22 is here, and you can click on your version and get an update of what's come into that with links to the articles on what that actually means for you to see what's going on. So that happens on August 3rd. Staging environments will be patched according to a schedule, which we will give all of our clients 2 weeks from now. So you'll be given a date of when your staging environment will be patched post August 3rd. And then we're actually mandating production because there's some security features in this release as well that will make sure that we're compliant with our ISO and cybersecurity. And I'm sure that's something that everyone should want. So there's then a 90 days period to apply that staging to your production environment. So you get to use the knowledge base and the articles about what's changed between your version and the current one to have a play, understand if there are any impacts to your existing workflows, if there's potentially new workflows and new use cases you want to bring into the system, collaborate with us on that, chat to your account manager, and then upgrade and start enjoying the features I've just shown you in this webinar today. So that's the plan. It's a little bit different to usual, but that's the plan to roll out this new release from August 3rd. Yeah, it won't be everyone getting updated on August 3rd. It'll be a staged thing across the client base, just being a little bit of an older web-based application. It's not like you push to the one code base like modern cloud systems, but yeah, we'll be looking to get those upgraded onto the staging environment ASAP. So that leaves me with 3 minutes to spare for any questions. Thanks for joining. It was great to see so many people log in. Hopefully you can jump on our website now and join the queue for the webinar next week. And if you've got any questions that you didn't want to ask in this one, please feel free to contact the account manager that you deal with or myself directly. And as I said, watch out for later this week for some big announcements, some big changes, exciting things happening at UniPhi. Maybe the joining and following our LinkedIn company page would be the best way to hear about those if you're interested. Not quite the same as like and subscribe, but something like that. All right, guys, I'm going to sign off now. Go and have some lunch. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for showing up. I hope that was useful. Bye-bye.